What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Sean Jones NBA show. I'm recording this on Monday, June 30th, so it is a little bit later, so you probably won't be listening to this until Tuesday, July 1st. Today was the very first day of NBA free agency, so we've seen a ton of new deals come in. Nothing too crazy because it is a weaker free agent class, except for the trade between the Nuggets and the Nets that swapped Michael Porter Jr. and Cam Johnson. But for the purpose of today's podcast, I'm going to be focusing on what happened last week, which was the NBA draft, which took place on Wednesday and Thursday evenings. But I'm going to go through everybody in the lottery, predict busts, all-stars, and role players, and then talk about a few other guys later in the draft that I also like. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get right into it. So I want to set the stage a little bit because every time we get to around draft time, there's always sort of a lot of maybe false positivity, if you will. Everybody likes all the prospects. Everyone's hyping them up. They'll mention the flaws, but the expectation is that everybody going in the top 10 or around the lottery is at least projected to be a pretty good player. But the reality of the draft is that that's not really how it's going to play out. The data shows that there's going to be a lot of busts. It's going to be some guys that turn out to be nothing more than a role player and some that do end up being all-stars. But it normally is a bit of a crapshoot to know who's going to be who. And so I'm going to attempt to guess which player falls into what bucket. And just to pull some numbers for you, I'm going to start pre-2022 because I think that's a little bit too recent to judge if somebody is an all-star or a role player or a bust at this point, just because guys typically take a little bit of extra time to be able to get in the groove and find themselves as players, at least for most players. But in the 10-year span from 2012 to 2021, there was an average of 5.5 busts, 4.9 role players, and 3.6 all-stars. So pretty close to an even split in the 4 to 5 range. It obviously varies year to year, but just to show you that there are going to be players that do not hit in the draft, just like there are every single year. And just to help qualify what I mean by bust versus role player versus all-star, so it's a little less subjective. I mean, all-star is pretty obvious. If you made an all-star team, you're an all-star, at least for the purpose of this exercise. But distinguishing between bust and role player, what I use is win shares is the stat that they have on Basketball Reference. You have to have at least 2 win shares per season since you were drafted up to a 10-year career for me to qualify you as a role player, which the reason I use win shares is because it's a good stat that shows your impact on winning, but it's also cumulative. So you could have 2 to 3 really good years to start your career, but then have really bad injuries and you're out of the league at a younger age. And then ultimately you probably were a bust because you just didn't stick in the league that long. Good example of that is Lonzo Ball. He still has a good chance to overcome those injuries and work his way out of the bust territory. But for right now, he technically would qualify as a bust because he just hasn't played enough games. And then you've got guys who they're nothing special, a couple win shares a season, but they've played long enough and built up enough of a career. I mean, if you're a solid backup for 10 plus years, it's hard to call you a bust. You stuck around in the league for long enough for me to say that you are at least a somewhat quality level NBA player. And so it kind of captures both sides of it, the quality and the longevity of players, which is why I do that. And of course, role player is going to have a large spectrum of what it could mean. It could be Kelly Olynyk, or it could be Jamal Murray. It could be Trey Lyles, or it could be Mikal Bridges. So really anybody that has not made an all-star team that fits the 2 win share per season threshold that I've laid out. So I'm going to go through each lottery pick 1 through 14. Usually I do this before the draft as sort of a preview, but this year I decided to switch it up a little bit because now we have the context of where the player is playing, which I think adds another, sort of layer to how I think that their career will pan out. And so once I finish doing that, I'll then name a couple guys at the end that I like that were not in the lottery, a couple guys that I may be lower on that were out of the lottery than consensus that people do like, and then we'll go from there. But starting out with the number 1 overall pick in this year's draft, that was Cooper Flagg that went to the Dallas Mavericks. Cooper Flagg, definitely the face of this draft. He was the number 1 high school recruit coming out. He reclassified, was actually supposed to be a freshman coming into this season, was only 17 for the first half of his freshman year, still only 18 now. and is the youngest player to be drafted number 1 since LeBron James back in 2003. He won the National Player of the Year, National Freshman of the Year, etc. Led Duke to a dominant 35-4 season, including a Final Four run. And a lot of people regard him as one of the best prospects of this century, and I would tend to agree with that. I think LeBron, Anthony Davis, Zion Williamson, Wemby, KD, just to name a few, I think he's in that conversation. I'm not saying he's number 1, but at least in that select group of just what we would call can't miss big name prospects. And on the season, he averaged 19, 8 rebounds, 4 assists, 48% from the field, 39% from three. He had ridiculous advanced stats. He was first among all first-round picks with a PER of 30.4. He was first among all first-round picks in win shares per 48 at .296. And he was second in net rating at a plus 37. So he was just ridiculous statistically across the board. But the eye test tells the exact same story. This guy was unbelievable in his 1 year at Duke. And I think that he has maybe the highest floor of a player that I can remember in a really long time coming into the draft, because he does it all. He really doesn't have many weaknesses. I mean, he is so elite defensively, and that's the one thing that he was definitely advertised coming into high school. I think people were a little unsure about where he would end up offensively, especially just so early on in his career as a 17-year-old going into college. But the defensive end, nobody had question marks about. I mean, he's especially elite as a help defender. He's such an event creator on that end, getting steals and blocks, only nearly 3 stocks per game in his freshman year. He doesn't foul very much. He had the second most stocks per foul among all first rounders as well. And the reason he's so good on this end, aside from his, physical acumen, is also just he is such a high IQ basketball player on both ends of the court. He always makes the right play. He has a great feel for the game. He knows exactly where to be on offense and defense, filling the space on offense and also knowing when to help on defense and whatnot. He's also a super good passer, had a 2-to-1 assist to turnover ratio, which was the second best among any first round pick, regardless of position. This guy is a 6'8" forward, and usually the leader in that ends up being a guard, but not in this case. He's a great athlete. He's, as I said, 6'8", 7-foot wingspan. He scores at all 3 levels of the court, and he was way ahead of schedule as a creator and an initiator offensively in his 1 year at Duke. He also shot way better than expected. I mean, all the doubts people had about his shooting, his creation, he answered all of it. In his first 10 games coming into Duke, he was 8 of 26 from 3, only 22%. But the final 27 games of the season, he went 44 for 99. That's a huge sample where he shot 44% from deep. He was also 84% from the free throw line, which we know free throw percentage tends to be a slightly better indicator of long-term jump shooting success than three-point percentage does in college. And so, again, he checks every box. There's really not a thing that you could point to say that he doesn't have it as a basketball player right now. If we had to nitpick, point at least a couple things that he could work on, I think his ball handling and his creativity on the offensive end could be a little bit better. I also think on the defensive end, he's probably a little bit better as like a help defender than he is a one-on-one defender. But again, these are really nitpicking. Cooper Flagg is, in my opinion, one of the most can't miss prospects that I've ever seen since I've been watching and covering the NBA. And I would honestly be shocked if he doesn't make an all-star game at some point. That is one thing that I am willing to put a lot of money on, is that he will be an all-star at some point. I wouldn't be surprised if it's as soon as his second season or something like that. I just think he's such a sure thing. And that's the thing, is like, even if he doesn't pan into an all-star, his floor is still a really good high-level two-way starter that he is going to defend. He is going to be a high IQ player on offense that makes the right pass, fits in the flow of the offense. His ceiling is really just dependent on how well the shot continues to develop and translate, and how advanced he can get as a playmaker, an initiator, and a creator. But I have no doubts that he can do all of those things. So I am picking Cooper Flagg as an all-star. And in terms of his fit on the Mavericks, I think he's kind of a fit-proof player. He's so additive that I think he can play anywhere. I think he can play with anyone. I think he can fit in almost any role, off-ball, on-ball, whatever you need out of him. I do think that he could probably benefit from some better guard play than the Mavericks are going to have. Kyrie Irving is obviously going to be out for a large portion of the beginning of this season, if not the whole year. They just signed D'Angelo Russell, who If you listen to my podcast, I'm not the biggest fan. And so he might be asked to do a little bit more with the ball earlier than expected, but I think he's capable of it. And again, I think he's pretty fit proof at this point. So picking Cooper Flagg as an all-star. Moving to number 2, Dylan Harper was picked second overall by the San Antonio Spurs. He was also a one-and-done freshman that went to Rutgers. He was the number 3 high school prospect coming into college. He averaged 19 points, 5 rebounds, 4 assists on 48% from the field. And he just fits the mold of a classic modern score-first elite guard archetype. The Donovan Mitchells, John Morant, SGA, Dame, Kyrie. I know that's a large spectrum of different types of players, and he's not exactly like any of them. But just to say that the lead guard that's kind of score first, but is just dynamic as an offensive player, that's what Dylan Harper is. He's also got really, really good size for the position. He's 6'5" with a 6'11" wingspan. That's going to translate to the NBA more so than some of these smaller guards that we see coming in to the league out of college. But he thrives as a downhill attacker. He's tremendous at providing rim pressure offensively. He's also a great finisher when he gets there. He made 73% of his shots at the rim. That was 11% above Division I average, but that includes bigs. That's not just guards. That's any player. So that's ridiculous for a guy at his size, at his position, to be able to finish with that level of efficiency in the paint. He's just really creative as a scorer and finisher. He's got good footwork. He's a super high level pick and roll ball handler. Makes great reads there, a premium skill in the NBA. I mean, if you can do that well, you can absolutely carve out a career for yourself at the next level. He's obviously score first as an offensive player, but he's also plenty good enough as a passer and playmaker. It's not his number one forte, but only Jeremiah Fears and Egor Demin had higher assist percentages among college first rounders in this draft. And he had a very solid 1.7 to 1 assist to turnover ratio, which is exactly what you want to see out of a guy at his position. He also showed plenty of flashes as a spot up shooter. He was 38% on catch and shoot from deep. And he's not going to be an all defensive type guy, but he's more than capable there. He's going to be solid at worst. He had averaged 2 stocks as a freshman. So he's not going to be a liability there. He's got the size. He's got the length. It's not going to be his number one attribute where most of his energy is probably going to go towards offense, but he's plenty fine on that end of the court. In terms of things that he could potentially work on, he's a good, not great athlete. So he's more of a below the rim player and finisher, not a guy that's going to dunk on guys when he gets in there, but more of a creative finisher at the basket. But again, he's creative enough where he can kind of make up for that lack of deep athleticism that would be nice to have at a guy at his position. He also is much better on ball than off ball. So I think he could learn how to play off ball a little bit more, especially given the situation he got drafted into with a kind of crowded Spurs backcourt with Stephon Castle and De'Aaron Fox. It's also not super encouraging that Rutgers was so bad. I mean, they went 15-17 this season. They missed the NCAA tournament despite having 2 top 5 picks, which this doesn't always matter. I mean, Anthony Edwards missed the NCAA tournament in his 1 year at Georgia. That turned out just fine. But then you look at a guy like Ben Simmons. LSU missed the tournament when he was in college. And, of course, he started out his career well, but we saw some lingering off-the-court type issues that maybe affected his play down the line. I'm not saying that's why LSU missed the tournament, but it's just something to think about. I also think that by far the biggest question mark for Harper is going to be his jump shot because, again, the numbers were okay overall. He was 33% from 3 overall in his freshman season, but he only shot 39 for 131 above the break on 3-pointers. So that's 29.8%, and that's huge volume. He took 4 to 5 of those per game, and he hit him at a really not very good clip. He was 10 for 17 from the corner, conversely. That's 59%, but the volume, I mean, over 100 less attempts there. So with his playing style, like I said, he's not much of an off-ball guy, so most of his shots are going to come from above the break on those. And so I think he either needs to be willing to play more off-ball to be in more of those opportunities where he can shoot from the corner, where he clearly does shoot it well from there, or he just needs to work on making that shot from the above the break. He also was only 15 of 51 on mid-range shots. That's 29.4%. So he basically lived in the paint. and was efficient from the corners, but not much else. And so the jump shot is definitely a little bit concerning for his long-term prospects here. But I just think he's too talented not to be, at minimum, a high-level starter with all-star upside. And I'm not saying he'll necessarily be a perennial all-star guy, but I think he'll at least sneak into one or two here and there, just like a De'Aaron Fox did, for example, who made one and hasn't really gotten back, but he's still like borderline fringe on that level. And I think Harper could be around that range as well. I'm not projecting him as like a top 10 guy in the league or anything like that. But look, he has elite NBA skills. He puts rim pressure on the defense. He's very good in the pick and roll as a ball handler and a decision maker. He's got size for his position. And all of that is just a really good combination for an NBA point guard in the modern era. And so how good he will be will depend on that shot. You know, if he turns into a 37, 38% shooter, then I think certainly he could be a perennial all-star type guy. But my small hesitancies are there. I do think he will be an all-star at some point. So I'm going to pick him as an all-star. But again, that ceiling is very contingent on the shot. So we'll see how that plays out. In terms of his fit on the Spurs, I don't love it. Just because, well, I do and I don't. You know, I don't love the fit with Fox and Castle. It's three guards that are not very good shooters. That's not their forte. They, in the Fox and Harper case, they both kind of are better with the ball in their hands. They both want to get downhill, and they're not great off-ball players. But I will say this. The fit with Wemby's great. And I'm not sure they would have traded for Fox if they knew they were going to get Harper. But I do think the Wemby-Harper combo could be elite for a decade plus, and it's hard to complain about that sort of situation for him. Moving to number 3 overall, VJ Edgecombe was drafted to the Philadelphia 76ers. This was another one-and-done top high school recruit at 4th overall. He was Cooper Flagg's teammate in high school as well. And he had a bit of an up and down year at Baylor, but I think context matters a lot. You know, Baylor had some pretty bad guard play, and he got a lot better as the year went on. So I think there were some really encouraging signs there. But he ended up with 15 points a game, 6 rebounds, 3 assists on 44% from the field, 34% from 3. This guy's number one skill is his athleticism. He is a monster athlete and probably the best in the draft. And that athleticism manifests with making him, one, as a great defender, but also just a beast in transition. Defensively, he's just incredibly active. He's great on the ball. He's great off the ball. He is a knack for getting his hand on the ball, no matter where he is, as a weak side helper or as a one-on-one defender. He gets into passing lanes. He breaks up ball action really well. And so I have just absolutely no doubts that he's going to be an above-average defender at the very least in the NBA, just given his size and physical acumen and just his motor and energy on that end of the court. And then in transition, he is an above the rim finisher. He turns defense into offense. And so that's when he's at his best, when he can get out in transition and use that athleticism to get into the paint and score there. We talk about some guys that come into the league often that need to work on things like, you know, being involved when they don't have the ball, their effort, their intensity, like, do they do the little things? Edgecombe cannot be more of the opposite of that. He does all of those things really well. He always gives high effort. He's high intensity at all times. He's great off the ball. That's actually when he's at his best. So you don't have to worry about him not being engaged in those scenarios. And he does a lot of the little things when he's out there, despite being a highly touted prospect coming out of high school. And like I said, right now he's at his best as an off-ball player. He moves around really well. He's a really good cutter. He had a ton of different times where he would go up on a back cut and get an alley-oop from one of the guards off the baselines. So that's the kind of stuff that he does when he's at his best, is just being a vertical threat, an off-ball threat. And he also showed a ton of improvement from 3 last season. He was 34% on the year, but he was 40% from the corner, which is probably, when he gets to the NBA, that's going to be where he's taking most of his three-pointers, most likely. And he had a slow start in the first 8 games, only 8 for 33, which is 24%. But then over his final 21 regular season games, he shot 40 for 101. So that was 40% from the field. He didn't shoot it as well once we got to the tournament. But again, he was clearly making progress there as a shooter. He ended up 36% on catch and shoot threes, which is not great, but it's not awful. And he was 78% from the free throw line, which is encouraging enough for me to think that the shooting touch is there. He just needs to continue to work on it and develop. And so I don't doubt that the shot will come around. On the other side of things, he is still pretty raw offensively. The shot it's no sure thing. Like, I do think he'll develop it there, but he was inconsistent at best. If you exclude the right corner, which is where he had his by far his best percentage, he was only 42 of 134 from three on the year, which is 31%. So outside of that corner, he did not shoot it super well. And the weird part about his game, too, for his athleticism and ability to get downhill, he kind of struggled as a finisher in the paint. He made only 49% of his shots at the rim in the half court, which that athleticism helps him get there, but he just isn't finishing at the level that he's going to need to be an effective driver of the basketball, especially if he isn't going to have a super consistent shot on the outside either. And he also only had a 37% free throw rate, which isn't terrible, but it's not great, for a guy whose main skill is their athleticism getting to the basket. You'd hope that he could draw a little bit more contact when he gets in there. It's more middle of the pack, so it's not a concern, but it's just you would hope it might be a little higher given his playing style. And he's definitely just not much of a shot creator right now, or a self-creator of any kind right now. He's much better as an off-ball player. His handle is not really where it needs to be a primary or even maybe a secondary initiator at the NBA level. He doesn't handle pressure super well when he has the ball, and he does not have a very good left hand either. So especially coming into the league, he's going to be more of an off-ball guy. And lastly, he doesn't have the size you would maybe love for a 3-and-D guy. I mean, he projects as more of a 3-and-D player, but he's only 6'4" with a 6'8" wingspan. Like, in the modern NBA, you hope your 3-and-D guys are more in the 6'6", 6'7", 6'8" range. So 6'4", he's very clearly a guard, so he's going to be a point of attack defender on opposing lead guards, which there's very much a need for that type of defender in the NBA, so he can absolutely carve out a really valuable role. But it just gives him a little bit less versatility where he might not be able to hang with some of the bigger perimeter players on the defensive end of the court. But overall, I have Edgecombe as a role player. I originally had him as an all-star, but as I started to dive a little deeper, the red flags were a little bit more than I thought they would be. Like I said, offensively, I'm just not sure he's ever going to be a primary guy. It's really tough to be one if you aren't a strong creator, but you also can't shoot consistently, which he can do a little thing of those both now, but not either at a consistent level. So he's going to have a lot of development to get to that point. I do think the shot will end up being average to above average if he continues to develop. So he definitely will, carve out some sort of role as a 3-and-D guy at the very least. But I'm just not sure I see the creation skills, and I'd feel a lot better about it if maybe he was 6'6", 6'7", but he's 6'4", so he's a little undersized. I'm not sure he ever projects as a creator, but I think the defensive upside is extremely high. The athleticism gives him a really high baseline to be impactful. He's a smart player that can fit within the flow of an offense, and he's got a high motor. And I'm going to bet on guys that have those sorts of traits. And so I think he can be a high impact two-way player. And if the shot develops and the creation develops a little more, then he maybe could have a higher ceiling than that. But for right now, I'm just going to pick him as a role player, a guy that can be a good two-way guy, but we'll see if he can ever get into a even secondary type role on the offensive end. Then at number 4, the Charlotte Hornets selected Kon Knueppel out of Duke. Another one-and-done player for the Blue Devils. Was not necessarily projected to be a one-and-done player. He was the 14th ranked player coming out of high school, but he way overperformed there. I mean, he ended up being the clear-cut number 2 at Duke behind Cooper Flagg. Picked up a ton of slack as the first option when Cooper Flagg went down with the injury in the ACC tournament last year. And he averaged 14 points, 4 rebounds, 3 assists on 48% from the field, 41% from 3, 91% from the line. And so Knueppel may be the best pure shooter in this draft. He kind of checks every box as a shooter. He was 41% overall from 3, 48% from the corner. He was 43% off the catch and shoot, 38% above the break, which is a really good number, 57% in the mid-range outside of the paint. So didn't have a ton of volume there, but still that's obviously an insane number. And then 91% from the free throw line. So he just really didn't have a weak spot on the court as a shooter. No matter where he was just efficient and effective as a shooter. He's not an elite level creator, but he is a super high IQ guy. He's a good decision maker. He had a 1.9 to 1 assist to turnover ratio, which only Jace Richardson and Cooper Flagg had a higher among first round picks. So one of the best at taking care of the ball, making the right play, making the right reads offensively. He never forces it, and I mean that both shooting and passing wise. He's not forcing passes into tight spaces. He's not taking bad shots ever, and he's a good team defender too, despite maybe not having the same physical acumen as some of the other guys in this draft. He's also pretty crafty offensively. He's got some very good footwork. He uses his body and strength pretty effectively when getting into the paint, using his shoulder to finish over bigger, potentially stronger guys. His handle is not elite, but it's good enough. He certainly can dribble and run the offense a little bit. Like I said, he takes care of the ball. He can run some pick and roll when he needs to. He makes the right reads, like I said, offensively, and he's a very solid passer with just good instinct in general. His shot profile is also very in line with the modern NBA, which you always love to see. He shot 157 shots in the paint and 207 shots from three and only 14 in the mid-range. So I mentioned that 57%. That was a very small sample. I actually think he might even benefit from taking a little bit more shots in the mid-range, because I think that's where he's going to be able to operate the best in terms of getting his own shot, and we know we can make it from there. But just to call out that he did not do much of that at Duke, because they did not ask him to. They were pretty much at the rim or from three team this past season. But he also has good size for his position. He's 6'5", and he plays a little bigger than he is. He's got a bigger, thicker body than a lot of other two guards here. But his biggest downside is pretty obvious. He's just not a very good athlete. He can seem slow-footed at times. He's only got a wingspan 1 inch bigger than his height, which is obviously never ideal for translating on the defensive end of the court, which this obviously could lead to him getting picked on defense, especially in one-on-one situations. He's not often able to create a ton of advantages on the offensive end of the court, which is just going to limit his ceiling as a creator. He only had a 34% free throw rate, which is below average for guys in the first round of this draft. So again, just not doing a ton of self-creation. He is capable, but it just it's not his main strength overall. And so I just think he could develop a little bit more as a initiator. And like I said, I don't think he's ever going to quite be a primary creator at that level, but maybe could work his way into a secondary. But for right now, I think he's going to be more of a role guy, playing more off ball than on ball, even though he is capable. He also, though he shot it really well, like I said, he didn't shoot it great on deep threes. If you look at 25 plus feet from the basket, which is right around NBA range, he was only 7 for 34 from there, which is 21%. So I don't worry he's going to extend it out. I mean, he's a 91% free throw shooter, 57 from the mid range, 40 plus from deep. Like, he's going to be able to extend that, I'm sure. But it's just something to note if we are going to nitpick a little bit on some of the flaws here. But overall, I think Knueppel is going to be a role player. If you can dribble, pass, shoot, and you're a good decision maker, then I think it's pretty rare that that's not going to at least translate in some capacity to the next level. And so if a prospect checks all those boxes, and especially if he has an elite skill to pair with it, with his shooting, then I find it hard to believe that he's not going to stick in some role. And I know the whole athlete thing is somewhat relevant, but we've seen, some of the best players in the NBA are not good athletes. Luka Doncic, Nikola Jokic, Jalen Brunson, Steph Curry. Like, it's not that these guys are terrible athletes, but that's certainly not what makes them great. It's more of their skills and tools and IQ, and these are all things that Knueppel has. So I think he's going to be able to be a solid NBA player. So I'm going to bet on those skills in a smart player translating to the next level. But I do think his upside is limited. I think he's got a clear cap ceiling as an advantage creator because of that athleticism, and he still needs to work on the handle a little bit. So I think he'll probably rely on others to create advantages and play off those guys, which is why I don't have him as an all-star. But I do think he will be a very solid role player in the NBA. In terms of his fit with Charlotte, offensively, I think it's a great fit. LaMelo can get him the ball in his spots. Brandon Miller can take pressure off as a secondary creator. And he's really not going to have any pressure to do anything except make open shots and the occasional initiation. But defensively, it is not a good fit because I talked about his limitations potentially there. Charlotte is a very bad defensive team. They just traded their starting center, and they're going to roll with, I guess, Ryan Kolkbrenner or Diabate, or just sign Mason Plumlee. Like, they're not going to have rim protection at a high level. And then they've just been a mess defensively with their personnel between Bridges and Miller and LaMelo and whatnot. So they're going to be really bad on that end, and it's not going to help him at all. But I think offensively it'll be a good fit for them. Then moving to the number 5 pick, Ace Bailey, who was drafted to the Utah Jazz. Another one and done from Rutgers alongside Dylan Harper. He was the number 2 recruit behind just Cooper Flagg, and he's been the topic of much discussion since the draft. He did not have the Jazz on his preferred list of teams. There was rumors that his agent was trying to dissuade teams from taking him to get himself to a preferred destination. And there was even questions about if he would even report to Utah once the Jazz took him. And he did. So all this is just a moot point, but just something to call out and maybe flag in terms of his overall judgment and whatnot. But at Rutgers, he averaged 18.7 rebounds, 1 assist, 46% from the field, a little under 35% from 3. And Bailey is probably the most tantalizing talent that we have in this draft. Off of just sheer tools and potential, he might be the most talented player in the draft. He has the size and the skills to be a star-level scorer in the NBA. You know, he projects as an elite shot maker. He's 6'8" with a 7'1" wingspan. He can shoot over almost anybody. He makes high-difficulty shots. He's great on the pull-up. He's got a nice step back. And he is a very legitimate individual shot creator and isolation player, which is a highly valuable skill, especially at his size in the NBA. So don't get me wrong. His skill set is very much one that any team would want, especially out of a guy as young as he is. And if you just look at his highlights, you might wonder why he didn't go higher, just because the shot making is just ridiculous. He's one of the better mid-range shooters in the class. He was 43% on 159 attempts. And he's shown legit flashes as well on the defensive end as a really strong help defender and weak side shot blocker. He averaged 2.3 stocks as a freshman. Only Cooper Flagg and Cedric Coward had a higher block percentage among non-bigs in the first round. But for all the talent, this guy comes with a lot of red flags. I mean, the shot selection and profile, he's really not ideal. He took more mid-range shots than shots in the paint, 159 from the mid-range and 147 in the paint altogether. He took nearly double as many mid-range shots as he took shots at the rim, 159 from mid-range to 86 at the rim, which is a really low number for a guy at his size and length. And he just settles a lot. He settles for jump shots, and it feels like he's almost more comfortable shooting them and prefers to shoot them, even if he's got a dude in his face, even if he's fading away, even if it's off one leg or something like that. Like, for example, Kon Knueppel, I just talked about how he not the best athlete. He took almost 20 more shots at the rim than Ace Bailey did, despite being 3 inches shorter and a much worse athlete across the board, and a lesser offensive role than Ace Bailey had as well. But it's not just the profile. It's the types of shots. I mean, the fading shots, contested, pull up, just not high quality looks across the board. And I think he gets away with it a little bit because he's pretty good at making hard shots, but he could be such a more efficient and better shooter if he just took higher quality shots across the board. But regardless of that, he is a huge black hole offensively. Poor decision maker with the ball in his hands in general, but he had a negative assist to turnover ratio at a 0.7 to 1 assist to turnover, which only Khaman Maluach and Conan Niedenhauser, the dude out of Penn State, had worse. And they're both 7-footers. So it makes sense. They're not really having the ball in their hand that often, not creating much. So for him to have that low is not a good sign. He also only had an 8.3% assist rate, which the only ones worse than him are Drake Powell and 4 bigs. Again, not a great sign. And part of this is because he just can't get dribble penetration to collapse a defense very often. And so he's just a bit of a ball stopper. And that's just the reality of where he is right now. And a lot of that, again, is because when he does dribble, it's not normally very good results. He's got a pretty loose handle across the board for a guy of his general skills. And he just can't be trusted for more than a 1 to 2 dribble move before a shot because he's going to be sloppy with the ball and he probably isn't going to make a good decision with where the ball goes either. His jump shot also is a little bit more theoretical than it is consistently good. He gets talked about as an elite shot maker, but he was sub 35% from 3 on the season, only 69% from the free throw line. Overall, just not a very efficient player. And it's really tough to make it as an inefficient player when 1, your best quality is your shot making, and 2, you just don't do many other things on the basketball court, which he really doesn't. He's also really frail, probably needs to bulk up a little bit, get more strong, which would probably help him in the paint as well. And none of this is to mention, 1, the Rutgers thing where they went 15 and 17, like I mentioned, and two, all of the weird draft holdout talk, which he's not doing himself any favors as trying to portray himself as a high character team first guy. And so I personally have Ace Bailey as a bust out of this draft. I just think there's way too many red flags as a prospect. I understand the talent, but a guy who takes exclusively jump shots, who can't dribble, who's a black hole offensively, I just don't see how it translates. He'll either need to be an elite efficient shooter or needs to improve other aspects of his game. Another good comparison to this is Michael Porter Jr. He's similar in that he's a little bit of a black hole, not great defensively, doesn't create much on the offensive end at all, but his shooting is so high level that he can last because he's a 50, 40, 90 borderline guy pretty much every year. Now, if Ace Bailey does that, then he probably won't be a bust, but he didn't do anything close to that at Rutgers. His shooting was well below what you'd expect out of a guy who's known for making shots. So we'll see what happens, but I have Ace Bailey firmly marked as a bust. In terms of his fit in Utah, I think it's fine. Utah has had a kind of mixed results at best, in my opinion, with their draft in recent years between Cody Williams, who looks like a massive bust, Taylor Hendricks, who has been up and down, had that pretty devastating injury last year. Keontae George has almost regressed a little bit. Isaiah Collier had some nice flashes last year, as did Filipowski, but we'll see. They kind of still need the cornerstone guy, and so I understand the upside bet on Bailey because he could be that. That's what they need. They don't need more complimentary guys. They need a guy who can be a 20 to 25 point per game scorer in the future there because Markkanen's getting up there in age. I don't know how long he's going to be around. And so I understand going for Ace Bailey in this situation, especially given the pedigree. But in terms back to the fit, I would have preferred if you went somewhere that had a little bit more of a proven veteran point guard. Collier's been solid there as a distributor, but obviously he's still very, very young. So I don't know how much we can trust him there. But moving to number 6, the Wizards selected Tre Johnson, another one and done freshman, but another high recruit. He was the 5th overall ranked high school recruit coming out. And he played for a pretty mediocre, not that very good Texas team. He was asked to do a lot for them because they didn't have a lot of other trustworthy offensive players, especially not guards. But he put up stats. I mean, he averaged 20 points, 3 rebounds, 3 assists, 43% from the field, 40% from three-point range, 87% from the line. And he led a stacked SEC, the best conference we've seen in a while, in scoring as a freshman, which was super impressive. Again, for a team that made the first 4 of the NCAA tournament. So they were at least a competitive team with him as the primary guy. And I know I called Kon Knueppel the best pure shooter in the draft, but I think Tre Johnson's the best movement and off the dribble shooter in this draft. He is just elite as a shooter, shot maker, and a scorer across the board. I mean, he shot 38 off the dribble, which is just a really impressive number on high volume there as well. He was 41% off catch and shoot. He was 55% coming off screens from deep, 37% above the break, 55% from the corner. And look, this guy's just a professional bucket getter, a scorer, and he's crafty getting his shots as well. He's got good footwork. He's one of the best in the class at generating his own shot, can score off the bounce, can come off screens, can shoot it pretty much anywhere on the court, and he can do it fading one direction on the step back. Like, he's just really creative in getting his jump shots, which you can't say about a guy like Kon Knueppel, for example, who's also a great shooter, but much more of a spot-up guy versus what Tre Johnson can do as an off-the-dribble guy. It's also got really good size for two-guard. He's 6'5" with a 6'10" wingspan. He's not elite as a playmaker. He's definitely a shooting guard. He's never going to be a lead guard in the league, but he's got the size and playing style to be a 2. But he's plenty comfortable for his position as a big 2 guard, a 1.5 assist to turnover ratio, which is very solid, a 16.5% assist rate. So certainly not a weakness of his at his position as a playmaker. He can make stuff happen there. But he does definitely have some clear shortcomings. He's not very strong or explosive physically, which leads to a couple things. One, he's just not a very good defender right now. He's not a disaster, but he's certainly not a plus, and I don't think he's going to be a plus coming into the NBA either. He just doesn't disrupt offensive players. He doesn't displace guys. He can be okay in the right team context, and he does give effort, so it's not like he's just dogging it out there. But he has some work to do on that end of the ball, I will say. He also has a real weakness offensively of getting to the basket and finishing. He shot only 80 shots at the rim all season long compared to 171 mid-range shots, for example. So he much preferred to pull up before he got to the basket if he could. He only made 46.5% of his half-court shots at the rim. It's a really low number. I get it, he's a guard, but he's not a smaller guard. That's the kind of number you'd see out of like a 6'1", 6'2" guy, not a 6'5" guy with a 6'10" wingspan. He shot only 36% in the floater range as well in the paint, not at the rim. He had a really low free throw rate, only 16.4%. Only Ace Bailey and Drake Powell were worse among first rounders there. And he generally struggles to get by guys on drives and just creates zero rim pressure. And he's not efficient when he gets there. And look, a lot of this is just because he's not strong enough yet. I think once he puts on some more pounds, I think we could see him start to be a little bit more effective there. He's only 190 pounds coming into the draft now. So that's something you can work on, which is why I'm not overly worried about it. But because of that, he just does settle for jumpers a lot, and it can lead to some slightly iffy shot selection at times. But again, he's bailed out because he's a really good shot maker. And I think it was a little unfair too, because he had to do everything for Texas. They really did not provide him much help at all across the board. And so his efficiency was maybe a little lower than you'd want, but I think a lot of that can be explained by one, his shot profile, because he takes a lot of jump shots, and two, because of the role he was kind of forced into. But I'm really high on Tre. I love his upside as a scorer and as a shooter. Shooting is probably the number one premium skill in the NBA right now, and he's just so damn good at it. And I love that he's not just a spot up guy, but like he's going to have such an easier role once he gets to the NBA, where he's not relied on to create as much, where he can just chill on the perimeter, wait for the ball to swing to him, where he can come off screens, where they can run plays for him that way, and he won't be the main focus of other teams. So I think his efficiency is actually going to spike up a bit once he gets with some better teammates. Not that Washington's a great team, but just having NBA level players around you is going to make your life easier. But I think he has 20 to 25 point per game upside, which to me gives him a great shot at making the All-Star game. So I'm going to pick him as a future All-Star in the NBA. I just think that the skill of shot making at a high level and shooting in all kinds of ways all over the court is such a valuable one. And even if he's never a great defender or never going to be a 5 or 6 assist type guy, which I'm not saying he can't, but even if he's not that, I still think he's got an opportunity to score a lot of points. And that's going to put you in consideration for the All-Star team. That's just how it goes. The scorers typically make it in. So I'm going to pick him as an All-Star. In terms of his fit on the Wizards, I don't love it just because they don't have a ton of talent around him. Just one of the least talented rosters in the NBA. I think he'll at least have opportunity for shots and usage, which is good because they don't have a lot of like foundational pieces on this roster quite yet. And it could be worse. At least they do have some veterans with Marcus Smart, Chris Middleton. I think those guys will help not only just coach him and mentor him, but just on the court, as decision makers, and they can help him get the ball in his spot. Then moving to the 7th overall pick, the New Orleans Pelicans selected Jeremiah Fears. He reclassified up to go to school a year early, similarly to what Cooper Flagg did. At Oklahoma this year, he averaged 17, 4, and 4 on 43% from the field, 28% from three, 85% from the line. Similar to Tre Johnson, he was asked to do a lot for his team as a freshman, and he mostly did thrive in that role. He is a super fast, quick, speedy ball handler that projects as a legitimate lead guard in the NBA. Probably the best ball handler in the draft, the most creative there with the ball. He gets to the basket really well due to both his handle and his speed, like I mentioned. Probably the fastest player, especially with the ball in this draft. And he's very good at creating advantages off the dribble, both for himself and for others once the defenses start to collapse. He's not afraid to play into contact. He was great at getting to the free throw line, 52% free throw rate. The only players above him were 5 big men in the first round, so that's really impressive for a guy, especially at his size. 6.3 free throw attempts per game, and he knocked down 80% of them when he got there. So he gets easy points, and that's, again, a real skill, and that's at a premium in the NBA. One of the better assist guys in the draft as well. 4th highest assist rate among all first rounders, 2nd among college players in that department. Also shot it very well in the mid-range. He was 45% there on 58 attempts. He was 43% on pull-ups there. And he's got a very good floater as well. Made 50% of those in his lone season at Oklahoma. But there definitely are a lot of things to pause with Fears as well. The jump shot is by far the number one thing to be concerned about here because he shot only 28% from three on the season. He was only 1 of 6 from the corners, 17%. So 1 just wasn't taking shots there, and 2 wasn't effective when he did it. He's got some inconsistent mechanics there. And again, on pull-up threes, he was only 15 of 71 on 21% from there. So his shot is a real question mark, which that's not always the end of the world, but he's a small guard. He is 6'3". He weighs 180 pounds. And so it's really tough to get by if you can't shoot and you're that tiny, not to mention that size led him to not be a very good finisher when he did get to the rim. He obviously generated a lot of contact and fouls, but when he wasn't fouled, he made only 44.5% of his half-court shots at the rim, which was one of the worst in this class. And he really just relies on drawing contact. And so if he's not going to get calls at the next level, then it's going to be really tough for him as a finisher at his size. And then it's going to be really tough for him to remain efficient as an offensive player. He also is one of the most turnover-prone players in this class as well. Not the best decision maker, despite his playmaking abilities. 3.3 turnovers a game at the college level. That is a really high number. Only a 1.2 assist to turnover ratio, despite being a pretty good assist guy. And he had an 18% turnover rate overall, which only 5 guys in the first round were worse. And he was third worst among guards there. And because of that size, he's also not very good defensively. The size is not helping him, but he's not always high effort, not always high engagement here. He doesn't provide much resistance in ball screens. He can fall asleep off ball a little bit, and he could certainly find himself getting picked on in the NBA, especially at his size and his frame. And so overall, I think Fears is going to be a bust. I just cannot get behind a tiny guard that can't shoot and can't finish. I think that obviously you look at the 85% at the free throw line and the mid-range success, and you say maybe the shot could develop. But I just think he better develop it quickly because he's going to be a sub 40% guy from the field if he's not making threes and he can't finish at the rim. Because offenses in the modern NBA are not going to be wanting him to take that mid-range shot very often, especially before he's a proven player in the league. And so it's just not an archetype that I think is well translated to the NBA these days. And if he was maybe some elite playmaker, passer guy, then I could kind of overlook it because at least he would have like a unique skill that he can fall back on. But he's not that either. And so I just don't see enough things that he's super good at that stick. I think being fast with the ball can only do so much for you if the other skills don't complement that. And so I do have Jeremiah Fears being a bust in the NBA. In terms of the fit with the Pelicans, I do think it's questionable at best. I think Jordan Poole is not exactly who I'd want my rookie inefficient guard to learn from. And then midseason, DeJounte Murray is supposed to come back, so there's not going to be a ton of minutes to go around for him. They still have Jose Alvarado as well. And it just feels like there's a lot of mouths to feed, a lot of ball handlers on this roster. And the Pelicans are kind of a mess right now across the board since Joe Dumars took over. We'll get to some of that later with their next pick. But yeah, not my favorite pick and not my favorite fit for Fears either. Next at number 8, the Nets selected Egor Demin, who is, again, a one-and-done freshman out of BYU. He's from Russia originally, previously played with Madrid in Spain. He averaged 11 points, 5.5 assists, 4 rebounds, 41% from the field, 27% from deep. He is probably the best passer and playmaker in this draft, especially when you consider his size. I mean, he's 6'8" with a 6'10" wingspan, but he plays point guard. And that helps him see over the defense at that size. We know that's always a huge advantage at that role and position. He averaged 5.5 assists, which was best among all first-round players. 1.9 assist to turnover ratio, which was 4th among all first-rounders. A 35% assist rate, which was 2nd among all first-rounders and 1st among all collegiate prospects. And he is just elite at processing the defense. He makes all the right reads, making the right pass consistently. He's great at finding mismatches for others. and he's a great lob thrower as well. So just as a passer, playmaker across the board, this guy checks all the boxes there. And then scoring wise, he did most of his damage in the paint. He was 48.5% in the paint, not at the rim, which is a really nice number, and then was 65% scoring at the rim. So overall, 60% from the field in the paint area. So very clearly a crafty finisher, guy who can score in a multitude of ways once he gets downhill to the basket. But sadly for Demin and the Nets, I mean, aside from the playmaking and finishing, there's really not a lot to love about his game. His jump shot is a real concern. He was only 27% from three in his lone season in college. He was just 4 for 14 from the corner, which is also not encouraging if he was to camp out there at some points in the NBA. He shot 26% from the mid-range, so not better at all when he takes a few steps in either, and he was sub 70% from the free throw line. So just across the board, the shot is just not there. No touch whatsoever outside of the paint, and there's really no signs of any sort of reliable development there. Despite his playmaking, his handle is also quite loose. So if he wants to be a point guard, it's going to make it hard to envision him in that role at the highest level in the NBA because his handle is just a little looser than you would want. And once he had pressure on him, he didn't handle it super well. So as more of a point forward, I could see him thriving, but then that's a really hard role to be in if he can't shoot. So it just leaves him in this weird, what position is he really type situation. And despite his size at 6'8", he also really lacks strength. He's just under 200 pounds at 6'8", so he does get bullied a bit on both ends of the court, specifically on defense where he's a bit of a liability right now. You know, he's too frail to guard bigger guys, but he's too slow-footed and a little too upright to be able to guard smaller guards. So positionally on offense, there's question marks about what he is. Positionally on defense, there's question marks about what he is. And so I usually really like high-level playmakers, especially ones with size, but I just don't see enough other translatable skills in Demin to be able to make it in the NBA. So I do have him marked as a bust. Like you could think about if Josh Giddey is sort of a comp, but if he was worse defensively, had a less reliable handle, and the shot was even worse. Because, Giddey is actually pretty respectable out there now, but we saw what it looked like in a playoff setting. I mean, I just don't see a scenario unless Demin makes huge development strides as a shooter or in some other capacity of his game, especially with how poor he is on defense. I just don't see what his role is in a modern NBA offense or defense. And then with his fit on the Nets, I mean, they don't really have a roster going into free agency. It's kind of a bizarre fit when you look at what they did overall. I mean, they had 5 first-round draft picks. They took 3 on-ball guards and then a point center also, most of whom really can't shoot at all. And so, I mean, I think this was a huge disappointment in terms of the draft for the Nets. They had 5 first-round picks. I'm not really sure I liked any of their picks, and it was just a really underwhelming class when they had so much potential with guys that were on the board at all these spots. So not a great fit for Demin across the board, but again, I'm not a huge fan of him. I do think he's going to be a bust, so not sure anyone I would have thought was a great fit for him. Moving to the 9th pick, we have Collin Murray-Boyles out of South Carolina going to the Raptors. He was a sophomore this past season. Part-time starter as a freshman, but really took off in his second season at USC. He was 17 points, 8 rebounds, 3 assists, 59% from the field, 27% from 3. And this dude is a dog defensively. He was extremely versatile on that end of the court. He played a lot of small ball 5 in college, but he's super switchable on defense, super high basketball IQ, especially on the defensive end of the court, averaged nearly 3 stocks a game. And this guy might be the best / most versatile defender in the draft this year. And a lot of that has to do with his size and his strength. He's 6'7", with a 7'1" wingspan. He's just under 240 pounds, so he's a big body, but he's not slow-footed or anything like that on the defensive end, despite that being a little heavier there. He uses that strength to his advantage down low, but is still able to hang as a switchable defender on the perimeter. On offense, he's not a go-to scorer. He probably never will be, but he has a super good feel for the game here, and he's a pretty good playmaker and passer, especially for his position as well. He's not a point forward where he's super advanced there, but he makes the right reads. He makes the right plays. He's a connector. He's going to he's going to play within the flow of the offense. So offensively, he's going to be able to hang around, even if he's never a go-to type guy there. He had a 22% assist rate, which Danny Wolf and Cooper Flagg were the only two non-guards that were higher than him in that regard. He's also a super, super good finisher down low. I mean, he made 75% of his shots at the rim, including 67% in the half court. Those are really healthy numbers there. He's great out of the dunker spot. He's great as a roller off of screens. He's a great cutter, all of these things. And he gets fouled a ton. 56% free throw rate last year at USC, which was second highest among all first rounders, first among all collegiate first rounders. And he also shot a very impressive 42% from the mid-range. So he had a little bit of diversity offensively outside of just scoring in the paint. It was lower volume, only 26 field goal attempts there on the season, but at least it shows he does have some touch there. But Murray-Boyles could potentially be a tweener. You know, he's sized more like a wing at 6'7", but he plays more like a small ball 5. I think it's generally pretty hard to tell how a guy that's relying on being a small ball 5 will translate to the NBA, but I think he does have the skills to be able to do it between his defense, his strength, and his length. But it doesn't help that he's not a super proven shooter. You know, if he had a reliable outside shot, I think at worst case he could slide into the 4 and be a really effective two-way guy. But he was only 9 to 34 from 3 on the season. That was 26.5%, and he didn't make a single 3 as a freshman. So it's going to be hard for him to play the 4 if he can't shoot it like that, especially for his size, which is probably going to box him into more playing small ball 5 more often, which, it's to be determined how successful he can be there. I think he absolutely can do it in stints, but if we're talking about a guy that's a 10-year veteran, a starting player, is he a starting 5 or is he a starting 4? I think that's up for debate right now, and it depends the fit on the team and who's playing next to him. He could probably get by as a 4 if he's got a stretch big next to him, but if not, then he might need to play more 5. He's also not a great ball handler or shot creator at this point. Like I said, he's never going to be really a go-to guy offensively, more of a complementary piece. So he has a clear ceiling if you look at it there. But I absolutely love Murray-Boyles' defensive upside. I think he has an opportunity to be an all-defensive type player, a high-impact guy there. Just a perfect modern-day defensive Swiss Army knife type guy, do it all on that end. I don't think he has the offensive upside to really hit like an all-star level, but we'll see how the shot progresses. That'll be a major swing factor. You know, if he turns into a 38% three-point shooter, then maybe he can be an all-star, because I do think he's got enough ball skills offensively to be at least maybe a secondary type initiator if he does have a shot. But I do think he, at the very least, will be a really solid role player and a guy that can have a major impact on winning. So I'm going to pick Collin Murray-Boyles as a role player in this league. And I don't love the fit on Toronto. They have a lot of guys who are in the 6'6" to 6'9" range, a lot of them who can't really shoot. So he's just kind of another guy to add to that list. But maybe they see him as more of a long-term 5, and he can play alongside those guys. Sorry, Jakob Poeltl, the future is probably not looking super bright for you in Toronto. But again, I think that they have a lot of interesting length pieces on that roster, and he'll fit right into that to some degree at least. Then, moving to number 10, the Phoenix Suns traded back for a pick that was originally theirs in the Kevin Durant trade and drafted Khaman Maluach out of Duke, the third Duke player to go in the top 10, all 3 of which are one-and-done players. He's originally from Sudan. Played only 21 minutes per game last season. They kind of brought him on slowly, and their center rotation was pretty matchup-based. They had Malik Brown, who would play against smaller teams as small ball 5, but Maluach, who played against more bigger teams. But he averaged 9.7 rebounds, half an assist on 71% from the field, 25% from 3, 1.3 blocks per game in those 21 minutes. And Maluach's greatest skill is that he is massive. He's just a big-ass dude. He's 7'1" with a 7'7" wingspan. He has a 9'6" standing reach, so can almost touch the rim just standing. 253 pounds, so unlike a lot of these tall dudes that have come into the league recently, like a Chet Holmgren or a Wembanyama, he's not frail. He could probably put on some extra pounds and a little bulk, but he's got a good frame to him already to this point, despite being only 18 years old. He's legitimately Rudy Gobert sized, which We've seen him obviously be probably the most impactful defensive player outside maybe Draymond Green of this era. And he's also extremely mobile for a guy his size, both running the floor and moving laterally, which is a really good sign because it's probably the biggest concern when you get these super big guys is can they move and are they going to be able to survive on defense? But he absolutely can. At least that's what he showed in his first year at Duke. His defensive potential is absolutely through the roof. His length is very bothersome. He's a very solid rim protector. He was top 5 in block percentage among first rounders in this year's draft. He affects shots even if he doesn't block them as a deterrent, just with his length and guys, changing their mind if they want to actually put the ball up once they get to the rim or changing their launch angle and throwing the shot off a little bit more. He was fantastic, especially towards the end of the season in drop coverage. And he was much better switching on the perimeter than you might think, especially for an 18-year-old big. He was able to hold his own there pretty solidly. They weren't able to really attack him much on that end when he did get forced in those switches. And his instincts are still improving on the defensive end, but he's so young. And given his age and the role he was thrust into on a championship level team at Duke, I thought he did a really, really good job for them, especially on the defensive end. He has really good hands in terms of this guy catches everything. If you throw a lob up to him, he's going to catch it and he's going to finish it. So you don't have to worry about that, which is another classic trait of big men typically. And aside from just catching him, he's a great finisher at the basket and as a roller, very, very good touch around the rim. He shot 81% at the rim this season. So basically never missed. And he was 52% in the paint when not shooting at the rim. So the floater type range as well with hook shots and stuff like that. So again, very good touch, even if you extend the range out a little bit. You look at a Rudy Gobert, for example, and he's not very good at those shots. But Maluach showed the touch that long-term he could potentially be able to even create a little bit on the low block potentially. Overall, 75.4% in the paint in general. So again, just did not miss many shots. He's an elite offensive rebounder too. He had a 16.5% offensive rebound rate. He had the highest rebound rate overall among all first round picks at 18%. So across the board is a very good rebounder, which makes sense for his size. He only shot 4 of 16 from 3, but he did show some real potential as a shooter. 77% from the free throw line, which again, that's typically a better indicator than 3-point percentage among college players. So he clearly has good touch. And he also, like I said, displayed good touch at the rim as well. And the fact that he was even given the green light is encouraging to me because, Shire could have easily told him, you're not shooting threes in the games. But he saw him make enough in practice to think that it was worth him shooting them. So especially at a guy at his size, his position, I don't think he would shot him unless they had confidence in his ability to make that. Of course, this is all still theoretical. But if he ever did become a true spacer on the offensive end, then he is just a crazy valuable weapon for this team moving forward. But in terms of cons, he's obviously got a really clear ceiling offensively. I mean, he is a 0 as a ball handler. He's a 0 as a creator, a 0 as a passer, but he plays within his role. So it's not like those things are an issue. He's not constantly trying to make things happen when they aren't there or anything like that. He just relies on others to get him involved on that end of the court. But he's very far from being a guy that you could, dump the ball down to and have a face-up game or something like that. I'm not saying he couldn't get there, but it's not a part of his game right now. And on his rebounding, I mentioned he's an elite offensive rebounder. He sometimes is weirdly not the best defensive rebounder for his size, at least. His defensive rebound percentage is almost the same as his offensive rebound percentage, which normally your defensive rebound percentage is way higher because just teams get more defensive rebounds than offensive rebounds. So he needs to be a little bit better there, using his big body to box guys out and actually secure the possession. But I'm sure that that's something that he can easily work on at the next level. And then the shot, I mentioned it. It's strictly theoretical at this point. I mean, only 4 3-pointers made in college. So to expect him to come in and start hitting 35% for 3 or something like that is just probably an unrealistic ask. Even though he could maybe get there someday. As I mentioned, he's only 18 years old. But I think Maluach has all the tools and the skill set to be a very above average starting center in the NBA. I think he has legitimate defensive player of the year upside because of his mobility and versatility on the defensive end, on top of the fact that he is just going to be a presence in the paint as a rim deterrent and protector there. He's likely never going to be an offensive go-to guy, which obviously does limit his ceiling. But a guy with his size, mobility, and touch, it's hard not to see him being just a high-level starter at the next level. So I am picking Maluach as a role player for Phoenix in the NBA. In terms of his fit with the Suns, I think it's good, not great. I think it would really help him if they had a reliable playmaker and passer at the point guard position that could spoon feed him. Because look, if you get Chris Paul with Maluach, for example, this dude's going to get 8 to 10 free points a night. I mean, seriously. But I don't know. Phoenix has not really had that reliable force at the point guard position. Tyus Jones just signed with Orlando, so he's not going to be back. I don't know if they're going to have that guy on this team. So that would be the ideal fit for him. But I think across the board, it's a fine fit. The needed center is obviously there. And guys like Devin Booker are obviously going to take pressure off of him. So, but the other part of the night for Phoenix was the fact that they traded for Mark Williams. I'm going to touch on this a little bit. I know a lot of people were wondering what the Suns were doing by basically trading for Williams and then drafting Maluach within a 5-minute span. A lot of people were wondering if it was an accident or not an accident, but basically that they didn't think Maluach was going to fall to 10. So they had kind of had the Mark Williams trade in place, but then it was too late for them to back out, which God forbid. I mean, good thing they didn't back out because poor Mark Williams, dude, just getting thrown right and left and then keeps ending up with the Hornets if that was the case. But then maybe they didn't want to back out of good faith, and so now they just add these two centers. But for anyone who thinks that's a bad move, I would implore you to watch Phoenix Suns games from last year because they had probably the worst center rotation in the NBA. Yusuf Nurkic was a utter disaster for them throughout his entire tenure with the team last season. Mason Plumlee was not much better. Nick Richards came in and had a couple of good games, and then we quickly realized, oh yeah, that's why this guy was the backup center on the Charlotte Hornets. And then Oso Ighodaro showed some flashes as a rookie, but has clear limitations due to his size. And I will also challenge that in the modern NBA, having strong center play is a must in 2025. It is by far the most exploitable position in the league, and you have a massive advantage the more solid center minutes that you have in today's NBA. I will just point you to some examples. If you just look at the last 4 NBA finalists, the Oklahoma City Thunder, they have 2 starting caliber centers on their team, and Chet Holmgren and Isaiah Hartenstein. They had one last year, and it didn't go well. They added a second one, and that was the difference between them winning the championship this season. The Dallas Mavericks just last year, Derek Lively, they draft number 12 overall. Then midseason, they trade picks for Daniel Gafford to pair them as a dynamic duo that they can alternate in and out depending on the matchup. And that turned out great for them next to Luka. The Boston Celtics, Kristaps Porzingis, Al Horford, 2 bigs that, again, they have one of them in at all times on the court and 2 guys that are starting caliber players. That's just 3 of the last 4 finalists. I could go down the list. Mobley and Allen for the Cavs, Porzingis and Okongwu for the Hawks. The Rockets played a ton of Şengün and Steven Adams last year together. The Wolves had for a couple of years Gobert and Towns. So this is a trend in the NBA. The more minutes you can have at the center position that are a plus, the better. And I think this was a smart move for Phoenix. I think they can now have 48 reliable minutes of huge dudes that protect the rim, that are lob threats, and that aren't going to get exposed in a big way on either end of the court. And so I totally understand why they would want both of these guys, especially after what they've had over the last few years. And I think Mark Williams is a really, really good player. I spoke very highly of him when the Lakers traded for him, and I said I thought that they might regret having rescinded that trade because I think he's a really good rim runner. He's a really good finisher. He's huge, as I mentioned, an insane wingspan, very similar to Maluach. And he's shown flashes as a potential shooter similar to Maluach, where he's around the 80% free throw line. He hasn't done much of it in the game, but at least the touch traits are there. So we'll see if he ever can turn into a floor spacer. I know he hasn't been spectacular on the defensive end, but I think there's untapped potential there. I think he's been a good deterrent, not so much a protector. So he prevents guys from getting to the paint, but then when they get there, they're still finishing at a fair rate to their normal number. But I don't think he had the best infrastructure in Charlotte. I mean, they had no good perimeter defenders. They were asking a lot out of him. And he obviously also has been a huge injury risk for them. So that was why maybe he couldn't get quite in the groove on that end of the court. But This also acts as insurance for the Suns because now Mark Williams, huge injury risk across the board. Maluach, super young, could take some time. Now they don't have to worry about one of those things because they at least have options. So I thought this was a great trade. The price was very cheap. It was the 29th overall pick plus a future first that's going to be in the 20s. So 2 picks in the 20s. Not to mention they end up packaging second rounders to get back up to pick 31. So they really just sent a bunch of seconds and then moved back 2 spots. So at the cost with how cheap it was, Mark Williams still only 23 years old. The possibility of pairing these guys together to have 48 straight minutes of solid center play, a good move by them because that's been a position of weakness. And now you don't even have to think twice about it because they're both super young, tons of upside, and contributors on both ends of the court. Okay, moving to number 11. The Memphis Grizzlies traded up with the Portland Trail Blazers to select Cedric Coward out of Washington State University. He had a pretty crazy path to get here. He had no D1 offers out of high school, started at a Division III school, then transfers to Eastern Washington, where he plays 2 years there, then transfers to Washington State. Only played 6 games last season due to a season-ending injury, then committed to Duke out of the portal for his super senior year, but then goes to the combine and just dominates. I mean, his measurements were great. He I think had the best 3-point shooting drill of anybody at the combine, and he rose all the way from a second rounder to a lottery pick, now a close to top 10 pick. And so I think most people expected him to go to Duke legitimately, but his stock just rose so much. It's really hard to blame him for staying in. I mean, a top 11 pick. I don't know how you're supposed to turn that down. So, but in his 6 games at Washington State last year, he had 18 points a game, 7 rebounds, 4 assists. He was ridiculously efficient, 56% from the field, 40% from 3, 84% from the line, which I know you would say, okay, well, 6 games, small sample. But if you look at the year before, his production pretty much matched it. I mean, 15 points a game the year before, 7 rebounds, 2 assists, 57% from the field again, and 38% from 3, and 90% from the line. So that might just be who he is, a super efficient guy. And it's now a multi-year sample of him as a really, really solid shooter. I mean, 40% in his 6 games last year, 39% in the 2 seasons combined before that. The volume ticked up his junior year from 1 attempt per game from 3 to 4.2, and then he was 5 last year. So a big enough sample for me to say that the shot is legitimate and it's there, and it also helps that he's a really good free throw shooter too. So to me, I think the shot is absolutely legit, and I think it's going to translate to the next level. But he's just been crazy efficient across the board. I mean, 71% from 2-point range last season, and 72% in the 2 years at Eastern Washington before that. Like, that number is probably not sustainable for a guy that projects as more of a 3-and-D guy at the next level, but he shot 14 to 17 at the rim last season. That's 82%. He was 8 for 14 inside the arc outside of at the rim, which is 57%. That's both in the paint and in the mid-range. And so we'll see if he can be that efficient, but I think he projects more as a 3-and-D guy. I talked about the shooting already. Defensively, he's got really nice prowess on that end as well. He's a good straight-up defender. He can switch fairly well. I don't know if he's an elite-level defensive prospect, but it should translate enough. I mean, he's got a really impressive measurements, like I mentioned, 6'5", with a 7'2" wingspan. And so he just has the ideal body and skill set for the modern NBA as a 3-and-D guy. But he's not just a 3-and-D guy. He can do a little bit more based on what we've seen to this point. He was pretty good attacking the basket off of closeouts. He can create a little bit of rim pressure. Gets to the line really well. He was a 51% free throw rate. That was 7th highest among all first-round picks. And he has shown some flashes as a passer last year specifically, averaged about 4 a game, had a 1.7 assist to turnover ratio, which is really good for his position, 20.7 assist rate last year, which is above average for the first-round picks this past year. But probably the biggest con is that I don't know how much of an on-ball player he's going to be. The ball handling has not been consistently reliable. The shot creation off the dribble hasn't been a huge part of his game. He's been really efficient, like I mentioned. But even more so than that, he just does not have many games played against high-quality competition. And so it's fair to wonder how legitimate some of these efficiency numbers are. He played only 8 games against Power 5 schools over the last 2 seasons. And in those games, he averaged only 11 points on 33 of 80 shooting. That's 41%. and then 5 of 34 from three. That is 15%. So his numbers went way down when the competition ramped up and it was more athletic, physical, higher level athletes. Among those games, he had 9 points on 4 13 shooting, 8 on 1 for 5, 6 on 2 for 10, 6 points on 2 for 6, 9 points on 3 for 10. So some of his worst games and absolute stinkers were against the best competition. So I think it's fair to have some slight reservations, and it would have been really nice to see him play at Duke, and then that would answer that question, obviously. I mean, if he performed at the same level there, he might have been closer to a top 5 pick next year. But we didn't get the luxury to get to see that this season, so he's a little bit untested there. Not to mention that he'll already be 22 years old by opening night, so he's a little bit on the older side, which is obviously not a red flag, but you'd prefer younger if you could have the choice. But I went back and forth on Coward because, again, it is tough. We haven't seen him do it against high-level competition, but I think because Memphis really wanted him and traded up for him, it kind of convinced me. Like, I think Memphis is a smart team that makes good decisions generally. And so I do think he is going to be a solid role player. I don't really see the all-star upside. I think he's got the tools of a 3-and-D guy. But as a creator, I don't know if that's ever going to be his thing in the NBA. But like I said, I think he can be a prototypical 3-and-D archetype guy with maybe a little bit more creation here and there, and a really efficient one at that, if he can at least maintain somewhat of the efficiency he had in college. Because, I mean, even if that 2-point percentage dips 10 to 15%, that's still insanely efficient across the board as a player. So in terms of fit, I think it's a great fit. The Grizzlies needed wings badly. He should slot in very nicely to the 2 or 3 spot. Good pairing with KCP and Jalen Wells. They were needing some reinforcements there with Desmond Bane and Marcus Smart out of the picture now. Moving to the 12th overall pick, Noa Essengue, drafted by the Bulls. He most recently played for, I'm going to botch this one, Ratio Farm Ulm. I don't know if I'm saying that right. He played in Germany. That's a German league there. And he is from France originally. So we've had a lot of French prospects over the last few years come in. But he averaged 11 points, 5 rebounds, 1 assist, 52% from the field, 28% from 3 in only 23 minutes for Ulm, we'll call it. This is a big upside swing type prospect. You know, he's still a bit raw. He has some very good physical tools, good size and length. He's 6'10" with a 7-foot wingspan. He's a good athlete, great mobility for his size. He's absolutely at his best in transition and as a roller to the basket. Runs the court really well, especially for his size. He had by far the best free throw rate for any player in this draft at 75%. So he takes contact, plays through contact, gets to the foul line frequently. Defensively, he projects quite well in terms of just his skill set. He's versatile. He's got switchability on that end, and he's a pretty strong rebounder across the board as well. But with Essengue, he is much more of a theoretical player right now. You know, a lot of these international guys come in pretty raw, and people like the tools and the skill set that could be there in theory, but the reality is that a lot of it isn't quite fully developed there quite yet. His jump shot is a project at best. He doesn't enter the ball super well. He has next to no creation skills right now, and his finishing is a little bit of a mixed bag as well. So on the offensive end, still a lot of places to grow, even on defense. He's not the highest IQ player, despite having a lot of tools there. And so the Bulls are betting on a strong development arc and betting on his size, betting on his length, betting on his youth. And aside from all that, there's also questions about what his position is. Is he a 4 or 5? Because he's a little undersized and frail to play the 5. But like a lot of these other prospects, it's like if you can't shoot the ball only 28% from 3, it's going to be really tough to stick at the 4 in the modern NBA. So he either needs to improve that shot or bulk up a little bit to be able to play the 5 full time. But with Essengue, I'm really not a fan of these predominantly theoretical prospects. I know sometimes they do pan out, like Giannis Antetokounmpo, a great example there. Pretty sure if I was doing this exercise back in 2013, I probably would have picked Giannis as a bust. I mean, super skinny guy who I don't know what position he plays that can't shoot. That's not typically the type of prospect I go for. But I will say, while there are always the Giannis's every once in a while, in general, I think that they don't pan out more often than they do. So I'm going to pick Noa Essengue as a bust. I just think there's not much to grasp on from a production standpoint from translatable skills that currently exist. And I'm not going to lie, the Bulls are not necessarily a great infrastructure for guys coming in. So I don't think that's going to necessarily do him any favors. In terms of the fit overall, it's fine. I mean, they need more length and athleticism in the front court. He'll probably benefit from having Giddy and playing off the spacing of Kobe White. But overall, again, going to pick him as a bust. I just don't know what his calling is going to be in the NBA because he hasn't really developed any above average skills to this point. Then moving to number 13, the ever so controversial 13th pick, in which the Hawks traded their 13th pick to the Pelicans. We'll get to that deal after this. And the Pelicans took Derik Queen at 13th overall. Another one and done freshman. This guy from Maryland. He was the 14th ranked recruit going into college basketball this year. He was a part of the best Maryland team in probably a long time. They made a run at the Sweet 16, nearly beat the eventual champion Florida Gators. And Derik Queen was their best player and the offensive engine that made this thing go. And he's kind of a throwback offensive player. He averaged 17, 9, and 2, 53% from the field. But he's a tremendous scorer down low and in the post. He has very, very good footwork, very strong finisher as well, 68% finishing at the rim, 58% in the paint, not at the rim. He can play some bully ball. He's a bigger guy, big body at 248 pounds. He kills mismatches down low. And he's also great at drawing fouls and playing through contact. 55% free throw rate, which is fourth best among all first rounders. So again, nice little throwback game with the back to the basket stuff a little bit. But he's also got really good ball skills for a big. He's really good handle for his size and his position. He's not just scoring as a back to the basket guy, but also as a driver, as a downhill attacker when he has the ball around the perimeter. We saw him hit that game-winning floater in the NCAA tournament this past year against Colorado State. He's very good and creative as a passer for a big and for his position as well. You can really run the offense through him a good bit, and he can be an elite level connector, finding shooters and cutters as he makes the defense collapse with his own offensive action. He's also a very good rebounder, especially for being slightly undersized for a big at 6'9". He was the fourth highest rebound rate among first rounders in this draft. But there are real questions with Queen because he projects as a little bit of a tweener at the NBA level. He's a bit undersized to be a center, but he's not really physically fit to play four. On offense, if he was to try to play the four, the shot is just not there, which is going to make it really hard for him to be anything but a center offensively. He was 7 for 35 from three on the year, just 20%. And it was not much better from the mid-range, 28% from the mid-range in his one season at Maryland. But the bigger issue besides the offensive part and the shooting is his defense. He's just a bit of a mess on that end of the court. He's too slow-footed to hang with guys on the perimeter, but he's not big enough or enough of a presence to be successful in drop coverage or as a rim protector, and he may end up just being really lost on the defensive end of the court, which is going to make it really hard for him to stick around if that's the case. And despite his reputation as a passer and a playmaker, which the eye test would tell you he's pretty solid there, he had a negative assist-to-turnover ratio in college. And his assist rate was below players like Thomas Sorber, Liam McNeely, who was in the bottom third of first rounders in this draft. So maybe he's a little overrated there. Maybe that means he's just sloppy with the ball and doesn't take care of it a ton, even though he does appear to be a pretty good decision maker in general. But there are also real questions physically with him because he's a bit on the heavier side. There are questions about his conditioning, about his motor, and he's also one of the older freshmen. He's going to be 21 later this season, despite being a one and done. And so I am really not a Derik Queen fan. He's the number one guy from this class that I've been against since well before the college basketball season ended. I just don't see it. He has some unique skills for a big and good ball skills, which of course are very valuable for big men in today's NBA. But ultimately, in the year 2025, I just cannot get behind a big who doesn't defend, can't space the floor, and isn't a special creator. Again, he can create a little bit, but it's not a a top tier talent that he has. And so I think realistically his upside is an energy big off the bench, which, hey, maybe he can carve out a nice career for that, but I do not see star potential. I do not see how he fits in as a high level starter in the modern NBA. And so I'm going to pick Derik Queen as a bust for the Pelicans. With his fit on New Orleans, I also hate it because I just don't see how him and Zion coexist. They're kind of similarly built players. Both of them probably physically more fit to play the four, but also both of them can't shoot. And so it's really tough for them to have them both out there full time. One of them have to play the five. So I don't know. I don't think it's a good fit across the board. And it's not like New Orleans exactly has a glowing reputation for keeping players well conditioned, especially when that's an issue for Derik Queen. But aside from how good I think Queen will be, I want to talk about the trade that the Pelicans made to get this pick, which was the 23rd overall pick they gave up in this draft, plus a 2026 unprotected first-round pick that can be swapped with Milwaukee, which I do not understand how New Orleans thought this was a good trade for them. Because even if you love Queen that much, if he was available at 7, you could have taken him then, but you didn't. So clearly even they know that he wasn't a top prospect in this draft anyway. But regardless, that pick is probably one of the most valuable first-round picks out there. It is inexcusable to move it under any circumstance. The only way you move that pick is if you're getting like a surefire current all-NBA player that you know for fact you're going to be a good team next year. But why would they think that they're definitely going to be a good team next year? They might genuinely be bad. They might be a 13 or 14 seed next year. I know they had a lot of injuries this year that they can probably point to say that's why they were so bad, but the West is absolutely loaded. It's going to be better than it was last year. DeJounte Murray is still hurt, not going to be healthy to start the year. Zion just can't stay healthy. Jordan Poole has not played a meaningful game in probably 3 years, and they don't have a reliable center rotation. Misi showed flashes, but that's about all they got there. And I don't like Fears and I don't like Queen. So I don't like either of their two lottery picks. I don't think they're going to hit either. So Trey Murphy and Zion are probably the only two things I really like on this roster. I like Herb Jones, but his shot was really regressing last season. But I don't like any of these pieces fit together. I don't hate all of them individually. I don't like them together. And so to think that New Orleans is so confident that they won't be a bad team next year is just crazy. I mean, the least they could have done is put like a top 5 protection on it. I'm sure Atlanta still would have done it. And the other part is, even if New Orleans ends up being good, having a Milwaukee first-round pick right now is also super, super valuable with the swap rights there, because their roster outside of Giannis is just awful. It's terrible right now. I mean, they lost Brook Lopez. They're bringing back like Gary Trent. They still have Kuzma, Taurean Prince. Like, they don't have a point guard. Like, it's just a mess, this roster. And if things go sideways, I don't think Giannis is getting traded now, but midseason, they're 10 games below 500. It's not out of the question he could ask out. And if that's the case, not only is that pick going to be a decent pick, but it's also a really valuable pick that I'm sure Milwaukee would love to have back if they do decide to trade him. And so now Atlanta's really well positioned to pounce on a Giannis trade, because not only do they have, I think they already had 4 tradable first round picks for him, but now they throw this 5th one, and that's an uber valuable pick for them. And so I just, Joe Dumars has been awful since getting back into that front office, since they really are going to miss David Griffin, who I thought did a good job there overall. And it's been a disaster. And I don't know what their plan is. I don't know why they would make this trade, but it is, yeah, I don't know. But shout out to Atlanta and Ansi Salo, who's done a great job since taking over as GM. They just keep making good move after good move. Got Luke Kennard and Nickeil Alexander-Walker in free agency, as well as the Porzingis trade, as well as this trade. They just keep making good move after good move in the Eastern Conference. That's very much up for grabs. So good for them. Okay, 14th pick. The Spurs selected Carter Bryant. This is the last pick of the lottery. Another one-and-done freshman. This one out of Arizona. He was the 20th ranked recruit in this past high school class. He only started 5 out of 37 games, only played 19 minutes per game for Arizona, but was a big draft climber into the lottery. I think a lot of people thought him as sort of a dark horse, late first-round pick guy, but then here he worked his way all the way up into the lottery eventually. So 7 points a game, only 4 rebounds, 1 assist. Again, lower minutes, but 46% from the field, 37% from 3, played a smaller role. but he has the ideal size and skill set of a 3-and-D wing. He's 6'7" with a 7-foot wingspan. Obviously, smaller sample, as I mentioned, but the shooting stroke looked smooth last year. He shot 37%, so good results across the board. He was particularly good from the corner, where he was 46%. That's where he's going to make a living for himself in the NBA, especially playing along all these creators that they have in San Antonio. There's no reason to think that shot won't translate, because I thought the mechanics were good, and he particularly shot well from the corner, which again is probably where the majority of his 3-point shots are going to come at the NBA level. Defensively, he also has really nice size. I mentioned the 7-foot wingspan, 6'7". He's very versatile on that end. He's highly, highly switchable on the perimeter, and he competes well and consistently on that end of the court. So I have no questions about his defense translating to the NBA either. He is not much of a connector creator at all offensively, but he was decisive with the ball. He's not a ball stopper. It doesn't stick. He does pass or shoot pretty much right off the bat, decides quickly what he's going to do, which really is all you can ask for a guy that's not a heavy creator like that. And he was also uber efficient scoring in the paint. Though it wasn't a lot of self-creation there, he still shot 34 for 41 at the rim, 82.9%, so basically did not miss. So that's always nice to see, and points back to his athleticism and length down there. And another thing is that his shot profile looks NBA ready. He took 105 threes on the season, 41 shots at the rim, only 30 shots elsewhere. So he did not take many mid-range shots, didn't do much of a floater game. It really was score at the rim or take threes, which for his role, what he's going to be asked to do in the NBA, that's exactly the kind of shot profile you're going to want out of him. In terms of his cons, he's a one-dimensional offensive player. There's no way around it. He's basically a spot-up shooter and scorer at the rim, but he cannot create at all. The handle's pretty tough. You do not want this guy dribbling the ball, really. He doesn't shoot it super well off the dribble or off movement. It really is more spot-up on the catch and shoot, and he's not going to be initiating anything offensively anytime soon. He's also pretty brutal in the non-rim paint area. He was 2 for 12 there in the little floater range, 17%. Wasn't great from the mid-range either, 33%. And he does gamble a little bit defensively at times. But again, he's not going to be asked to do anything that's outside of his skill set. I think his ceiling is very clear, and I'm not sure he has the offensive upside, but his floor is very high. And I think he slots in very nicely as a 3-and-D archetype on this team. And I think it's a great fit for this roster as well. The Spurs, they need more shooting. He fills that role for them. He should get a ton of looks playing alongside Wembanyama, Fox, Dylan Harper, etc. And there's plenty of creation around him. So great fit on the Spurs. Thought this was an awesome pick for them. And I think Carter Bryant is going to be a role player in the NBA. Okay, so now I'm just going to move to rapid fire. Some non-lottery guys that I personally really like and thought could have went higher, could be steals. Number 15, the Thunder took Thomas Sorber. I think he's just going to be a really solid rotation big, good rebounder, good rim protector. Nothing special on offense, but I think that he is basically going to be the Hartenstein replacement when he eventually moves on, which is exactly what they needed, and I think he'll fit in nice there. And it's hard not to feel better about guys when the Thunder take them too. Number 20, I think this is probably the biggest steal of the draft, in my opinion. The Heat took Kasparas Jakučionis. I am very, very high on Jakučionis. He averaged like 15, 5, and 5. He is a very, very high-level ball handler and runner of the pick and roll. Like, he can get to the basket. He gets fouled a lot. He has a very nice step-back three. He turns the ball over a little bit too much, and he didn't really play super well in the second half of the season for Illinois. But there were some question marks about a potential injury or something like that. But the first half of the season shot the ball much better over that span. And I just think he's got a high-level skill set as a shot creator, an initiator, a ball handler, guy who can get his own shot, a guy who can set other guys up. And so I'm very high on Jakučionis. I think that he has borderline all-star type potential. I think he probably is more, if he does ever make it, it's more of like a one-time thing, like a Goran Dragic type guy. But I think he is just an absolute steal. And I had him as a borderline top 5 prospect, definitely top 10 guy. So I was pretty surprised he dropped down to the 20s there. Then at 24, loves that the Kings took Neat Clifford, older player, but just really good 3-and-D guy. He's a great rebounder for his position, good shooter from outside, good defender, can create a little bit, good high IQ guy. I just think a high floor guy. Like he's gonna be pretty good. He's gonna be a rotation player. Probably never a star, but I just thought that was a good win now piece if you're the Kings to add. I liked the Rasheer Fleming pick, 31 by the Suns. He's doesn't come without risk. He's a total zero as a ball handler and a creator. And his shots got a little funky form, but it was effective, 39% last season. He's got a 7'5" wingspan, so he projects as a really nice defensive piece as well. Was a really nice help defender and weak side shot blocker as well. So I just like his physical measures and the fact that he could be a potential stretch four for them. The Magic, Noah Penda, I like him as well as a defensive prospect. I know he's leaving a little bit to be desired on the offensive end, not much of a shooter, not much of a creator, but he's got good size. He's a really good defensive prospect as well. So I just think that if the shot can come around a little bit, then he could potentially mold into a 3-and-D guy, but it is going to be contingent on that shot. Then lastly, Chaz Lanier for the Pistons at number 37. I think he is the second coming of Malik Beasley. He's a very, very high-level three-point shooter. Doesn't do much else. Not a playmaker at all. Not the best defender, but he just makes shots. And he can make shots off the dribble. He can make them off the catch. He can make them off screens. So I think he's going to stick as an NBA player. He's got decent size as a two-guard as well, 6'4", 6'5"-ish. So I like that pick for them, especially given the Malik Beasley news where he might not be back. Then some deeper cuts, some undrafted guys I liked. Ryan Nembhard out of Gonzaga got picked up by the Mavericks. Just as playmaker and passer in the draft this year, even though he went undrafted. He's really small, 5'11", so it's going to be tough for him to stick, but he was a 40% three-point shooter last season, averaged almost 10 assists per game. His brother, Andrew, yes, they are related. Obviously, he's a really high-level player. He's 6'5", so, definitely different archetype of player. But I don't know. I think he's tough. I think that if we're going to have a TJ McConnell type guy make it out of this draft, he's that guy in this draft. And then I like Hunter Salas, who was signed to the 76ers, undrafted out of Wake Forest. He shot the ball really poorly last year, sub 30%, but that was after shooting it like pretty well throughout his career. It seemed like that was more of an outlier season. But a previous top 20 recruit that went to Gonzaga, didn't pan out there, transferred to Wake Forest. He's just a bucket getter. He knows how to score. He's got good size at the wing position. And I think he could stick just as an underrated guy who's going to go get buckets. He was averaging 20-ish points a game for Wake Forest over the past couple years. So, yeah, I like Salas. And then a couple guys that I am lower on than consensus that I'll touch on. Walter Clayton Jr. for the Jazz. He's undersized, and he's not a point guard. A 6'3", predominantly scoring two-guard type guy. I think his ceiling is as like a sixth-man type player. But I don't know. I just don't really see it with him. He does not get to the basket at all. Doesn't get fouled very much. And he's really relying on jump shots, but he doesn't have the size where I'm going to trust that that's going to translate to the next level. Jace Richardson for the Magic, just Jason Richardson's son. Same thing. He's just really small. I think he's got a better chance to stick than Walter Clayton. But again, just 6'2", 6'3", but he's so clearly not a point guard. Like he just is a shooting guard. So there's not a lot of examples of guys at that size that are clearly off-ball guys. And so we'll see. He could turn into a decent bench player, probably. But when there were talks about him going near the lottery, I thought that was crazy. I don't hate it. At 25 to the Magic, I don't mind that pick, especially because they need shooting, and he's one of the better shooters in the draft. But there was a lot of time during the regular season of college basketball, he was projected in the top 10, top 15 range, which I thought was way too high. Danny Wolf to the Nets at 27. Don't see it with him. Don't see the defensive impact. He's not a great shooter. Again, big men that can't shoot and can't defend. Not sure where their spot in the NBA is. I know he's a good passer, good playmaker. He's playing point center for Michigan. But look, unless you're Jokic level, it's really hard to stick there. Then 29, the Hornets took Liam McNeely. Again, don't see it with him. He was labeled as a great shooter. Did not shoot the ball very well in college, though. Don't think he's a great athlete. Not sure what his core elite skill is. You think it's shooting, but again, the results weren't really there this past season. He's got decent size, but I don't know. If he doesn't make 40% of his threes and be more of a Sam Hauser type, I'm not sure what his role is. And then number 35, the 76ers took Janai Broome, which to me, like Reynold from Stanford was on the board here as a center. He dropped. I much prefer him to Broome. Adu Thoreau was on the board to the Lakers right after this. Like I prefer him over Broome if you're going to go for like a bigger, athletic wing, for example. bigger athletic big, for example. But Broom, he's old as hell, zero upside offensively. He's a back to the basket guy, doesn't shoot, not sure he's going to be quick-footed enough to hang around defensively. I just don't really think he's going to be anything more than maximum a spot minute, 15-minute guy. That's a backup center. So I know he was great in college, but we see this all the time with bigs where it just doesn't translate. So, and that's going to do it for this episode of the Sean Jones NBA Show. Thank you so much for listening. I know there was a big trade that went down today, a lot of free agent stuff going on. So I will get to that stuff probably early next week once the dust settles a little bit. I want to wait till more of the transactions actually come through so we can do a more holistic view. I don't want to have something drop mid-episode or anything like that. So hopefully by the time a week goes by, most of the free agents have signed. Most of the big trades that are going to happen as well. But I'll get to all that stuff and cover it when it is time. So with that said, thank you so much for listening, and I will chat with you soon.